Are you ready to create riches in your work and life? It's time for Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV, where you can discuss, debate, and get advice on how to discover and shed the bitches of fear, insecurity, self-doubt, and negativity, so you can realize your dreams and life purpose and create and accelerate the riches in life you deserve. So let's welcome your ball of fire host, Bernadette Bowes.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of Shedding the Bitch Radio and TV. I'm Bernadette Bowes of Ball of Fire Coaching, and what we try to accomplish here is to really bring you the guests and the topics that would really help you shed your bitches in order to really create riches in your work and your life. And so I'll be introducing a rich question to you in just a minute. But what we want you to do is get ready to be grounded in this conversation. We're going to bring fun to finance. Who doesn't think finance is fun? Money management, budgeting, restricting yourself. And who has some hangups? Who has some bitches of fear, insecurity, doubts, negativity around money? Well, we're going to take care of all of it today, and we're going to bring fun to finance. So the prevailing attitude among many in the financial world seems to be money only works if you take it seriously. But treating money as only slightly less fun than a colonoscopy means avoiding the important work of taking care of your finances, according to our guest. Emily Guy Birken brings some much needed humor and lightheartedness to the topic of money management. So what we're going to get into and discuss is how to make money much less stressful, which will also lead to better financial outcomes. As well, how to figure out your why, which makes financial decisions easier. And lastly, how gamification can help even the most reluctant budgeter. Now, we're going to talk probably a lot more, but those are going to be the three things that I want you to be focused on. So your rich question, which again, helps you to ground yourself in the conversation that we're about to have. And then maybe you're, all of a sudden thinking of the questions that you have, you can pose them in any of the posts that you see this streaming on our podcast streaming services, as well as on our Shedding the Bitch YouTube channel. And at the same time, you can kind of listen for intentionally the advice and the tips that our guests will provide. All right. So let me introduce you to Emily and then bring her in. Emily Guy Birken is a former educator, lifelong money nerd, and a Plutus Award-winning freelance writer who specializes in the scientific research behind irrational money behaviors. Her background in education allows her to make complex financial topics relatable and easily understood by the layperson. Her work has appeared on the Huffington Post, Business Insider, Kiplinger's, MSN Money, and the Washington Post online. She is the author of several books, including The 5 Years Before You Retire and Financial Stress Now, and the brand new book, Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management, written with Joe Saul-Sehy. Emily lives in Milwaukee with her spouse, 2 sons, a retired racing greyhound, and a cat who doubles as a throw pillow. How are you, Emily?
I'm doing great. And speaking of my retired racing greyhound, he is taking his retirement very seriously behind me.
Yes.
He's asleep on the couch in my office.
And he's beautiful. He almost for those of you who are just listening, you have to go over to our Shedding the Bitch YouTube channel and check out this video. Beautiful. He, she or he? He almost looks like a statue, like he hasn't moved since I've seen him. So that's fabulous. And we were talking, everybody, both audio and video, that I too have 3 dogs in my studio with me. And I have hardwood floors, clitter, clatter, clitter, clatter. So don't adjust your laptop audio. It's not you. It is the lovely claw steps of pets. And we absolutely love that here. Well, I am excited about having this conversation. One, because the fun of it, we probably can find many or very few people who raise their hand going, yeah, financing, budgeting, money management is fun. Mm-hmm. But yes, you bring the humor and the fun to it. Let me ask you though, based on your background, how did you all of a sudden want to take this spin when it comes to money management?
Well, so I have two major life goals. I like to tell people this. So one has very little to do with my career, and that's to have shiny hair. Um,
Okay.
my second major life goal is to be funny. And I say that, and people will be like, "You're funnier than you think you are." I was like, "No, no, no. I'm working towards it. This is a constant working towards goal." And so that's always been true when I was a teacher. Prior to that, when I was job hopping, and now that I'm a writer in the finance space. Now, the thing is, when you write about money, many of your clients edit out even the most gentle of humor.
Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth?
And it's understandable. They want to adjust the facts kind of sentiment in what I'm writing. So with this book, I really wanted to kind of lean into the idea that you can have a much better outcome with your money if you are lighthearted, if you look at it from a humorous point of view, and if you really focus on the joy and the fun that you can have. Because when everything is dry and deadly serious, you're going to turn off the people who most need to read money books.
Right.
So
right.
I had an experience. My most recent book prior to this one was End Financial Stress Now. And I wrote that book because I had for many years been wanting to help people recognize that a lot of the financial stress that we carry is completely unnecessary. Now, that's not to say that you can live without financial stress. Everyone is going to feel some financial stress. But a lot of the stress that we carry comes from things that aren't about the money, because money doesn't actually exist in the real world. It's a delusion we all share. That doesn't make it any less real, but it doesn't really exist. It doesn't exist in nature. You can't eat it. You can't build shelter out of it. You can't wear it. You can't even spend it outside of where it's accepted as legal tender. So because it's this kind of delusion we all share, we all put our own belief systems onto money, and we put our morality, our neuroses, our childhood trauma onto money. And so a lot of times when we're feeling stressed about money, what we're feeling stressed about is this meaning we've put on money rather than the money itself. So I wrote End Financial Stress Now, and a friend of mine from college was super excited for me, and she told me she bought the book, but that she was afraid to read it. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, why are you afraid to read it?" And she said, "I'm afraid it's going to tell me I'm doing everything wrong." And of course, I reassured my friend, but that made me realize, the people who are, I most want to help. And, with a book that I intended to be reassuring, are going to have this big limiting belief that keeps them from picking up their book,
Right.
that book. And so getting a chance to work with my friend Joe, who's a podcaster, he podcasts with, it's called Stacking Benjamins. And he focuses on being funny and lighthearted. And getting a chance to do something that is going to be a book that you can enjoy reading, even if you don't like reading about money.
Yeah.
That was going to allow us to help a lot of people who are being left behind by normal financial books.
That's awesome. All right, but that was loaded. You might not know that, but that was a loaded response, which is awesome. Awesome. But I need you to break it down a couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
The first is when you were talking about the fact that money is an illusion,
mm-hmm.
that money is not natural. It's not part of of the existence. You need to help our listeners and our viewers understand what you mean by that.
So the thing about money is, as I said, it doesn't exist in nature. So if you even see like animals that, in nature do some sort of, trading or bartering or something like that, there is no currency that is universally accepted. This is something that human beings created. And, if you spend any time thinking about it, it does get a little weird. You're like, okay, so there's this green piece of paper and it's got a dead guy on it, and it's got a number on it, and I can exchange it for goods or services. And if it's taken from me, I can't get it back.
Right.
The numbers on a screen represent the dollar bills. So all of that is, if you just spend any time thinking about it, it's just like, how did we come up with this? This is a very weird system.
No, I mean, this was explained to me several years back.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest with you, Emily, I just sat there like I was like, what in the hell are you talking about? You know, like I have a dollar bill in my hand. I have coins in my pocket. It allowed me to have food in my refrigerator. What are you talking about? And yet, just like you just explained it, the minute I really started thinking to myself, oh my God, I could rip up this piece of paper, you know, but yet I'm so like tied to it because I'm like, no.
Well, and the thing that I like to think about, well, not like to think about, but one of the ways that it helped me kind of come up with this thought process was thinking about like the zombie or alien or robot apocalypse.
Yes.
So if the zombie apocalypse comes, the graves are opened, and the undead are walking the streets, and everyone's like putting plywood over their windows to protect themselves. No one's going to care about the Dow Jones. No one's going to care about the banks. The dollar bills, the money that you have in your wallet are going to be meaningless. The fact that you have a BMW will be meaningless unless it's a reliable source of transportation, but that's only until the gas pumps run dry.
Right.
So and that's where once you start recognizing how fragile the system is, and when I say fragile, I don't want to scare people to be like, oh, everything's going to fall. That's not what I mean. What I mean is it works for the particular way that we live now. It's the system that we live under now, but that doesn't mean it's always been the same system or will always be the same system. And kind of recognizing that, I find to be very freeing. I know some people might find that like terrifying, like, well, okay, but I understand how to, balance my checkbook now. I understand how to do this.
It took me 48 years, Emily, and now you're going to tell me something else. No.
Well, and the thing that speaking of bringing fun to finance, the thing that got me to realize how freeing this is was reading a graphic novel about the Holocaust.
Okay.
So there's a book called Mouse by Art Spiegelman. It is about his father's experience in the Holocaust. His father was a man named Polish man named Wladek. He was Jewish, and he was incredibly talented as a businessman. And so even though his business was taken away from him and all his money was taken away from him, and he was in the ghetto at first with his wife, he managed to find ways to like make trades and barter and things like that and get better treatment for himself and his wife, and even make some money when he wasn't allowed to in the ghetto, because he had that innate ability. And then even when he went to the concentration camp, the same thing happened. And so for me, I find it very freeing to have that realization, like, oh, okay, so money isn't really real, but what is real is what I can do. My skills are real. Right. So I will be able to apply them to whatever situation comes up.
Yeah.
So whether that's a likely situation, like job loss or something like that, I can use the skills that I have honed, that I'm very good at, to deal with job loss, or something completely unlikely, like zombie apocalypse, or something slightly more likely than that. Pandemic.
You see it with a lot of natural disasters, right? Like towns are like destroyed. The people lose everything, and yet they find a way to survive. They find, and not even just survive, but even to thrive. So that helped me kind of, and is your goal to kind of help people to let go of that tight grasp that they have on something that they consider as materialistic and is like a must-have, and yet let go of it, because you would be fine even if you didn't have it.
Exactly. Yeah. The thing I like to remind people is when you are looking for some financial stability, which I don't think actually truly exists, because should the alien apocalypse come, Warren Buffett's going to be just in the same boat as the rest of us.
Yeah.
But people are looking for that, and they have this idea that once they have enough money, the money will take care of them. And that is like putting a pile of money behind the driver's seat and turning the car, letting it go. You're behind the driver's seat. The money will certainly help. It's a tool.
Oh, I love that.
But it's not something that you want to be driving. You want to recognize what you bring to the table, what skills you have, and then also recognize where you do need money to help you with things, so that you can focus on the things that you're good at and rely on money for the things that you need a little help with, and recognize just how many skills you bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love it, especially that car analogy, because it's so true. So let's bring some fun to finance. What would you say, or what is so important for people to possess a playful attitude about money, especially when they are in a state of anxiety or stress, even panic and desperation around it? Why is it important to have a playful attitude, and how can they get there?
Yeah. So when you are looking at money as life or death, every decision feels much more fraught. So every decision, it feels like, oh my goodness, if I mess up this decision, I'm going to ruin my life. And so one thing that I remind people of a lot of times when I talk to people and they're really, really anxious about money, I'll ask them, do you cook? And they're like, yeah, I cook. I'm like, do you cook chicken? I'm like, yeah, I cook chicken. What's the worst thing that happens if you cook chicken incorrectly? You could make someone sick, or they could die. What's the worst that happens if you do money incorrectly? Now, unless you're embezzling or knocking over banks or anything like that, the worst that happens is you have less money. No, that's not to say that's not a terrible thing.
Right.
But nobody will die.
Right.
Nobody will die. And yet people feel a lot more comfortable trying out the new chicken recipe, where if they get the wrong chicken, or if they cook it incorrectly or not quite enough, that could give someone salmonella. They could get seriously ill or die. So that's one of the things that I want people to kind of keep in perspective is it's serious, but it's not as serious as you think it is. Then the other aspect of it is, when I was first out of college, I worked at Barnes & Noble. I was making $8.25 an hour, which this was back in 2001. So it went farther than it does now, but it still wasn't a whole heck of a lot of money. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle to make sure that I could pay my rent, my student loans, groceries, all the things that I needed. But the way that I was able to do it was I started looking at my money like a Tetris game. So if you've ever played Tetris, it's like the blocks are falling constantly. They're weird shapes, and so sometimes they don't fit in a nice way. So it looks a little bit ugly, but once you're able to fill in a line, it disappears. And so I realized that my bills were a little bit like Tetris. They kept coming. Like with Tetris, they never stop coming. If you mess up on one turn, it makes the next turn harder. But if I started thinking about it like Tetris, where like in Tetris, you can move things around and change directions and find a place where it can fit. That gave me the freedom to, instead of being like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to pay my car insurance bill. I've got rent due and blah, blah, blah. I started thinking about it more strategically, like it was a game, like Tetris. Like, oh, okay, well, if I plan on doing this and then do that, if I change my due date with my credit card, because they'll let me do that, then maybe I could use the money that I was going to do that to go to my auto insurance. And so all of a sudden, because I brought a spirit of play to my very, very constrained budget, I was much better able to look at it in a way that allowed me to make decisions that weren't based on anxiety or fear or concern.
Right. Well, and I love that, because what you're also saying, and I know I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to talk about gamification, because again, what you were just describing too, because I'm very visual, just brought up for me that, I would look at it as like kind of like a competition. It's like,
Mhm.
how can I beat myself at figuring out that
Yes.
if I can't pay this, but I can pay this, and what if I
Mhm.
called up and said to my cable company, hey, look,
Mhm.
I need a cheaper rate, and I would kind of make it a game to challenge myself that if it looks like this right now, my monthly expenditure, I'm going to try to get it down 10% by the,
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
is that also part of like making this fun and playful?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, depending on what resonates with you, finding a way to make finance decisions fun and playful can make a big difference. So, I've always been a money nerd, as you mentioned. My husband is not necessarily. When we first got married, he owned a house and he had a home equity line of credit on it that was not paid off. And I was like, I am not comfortable with that not being paid off. So when we first got married, we lived on his income and we used mine to pay off his HELOC. Now the thing is, he was like, whatever, it is. And I was like, no, this will be fun. He's like, sure, it'll be fun.
Sure, it will be. Sure.
So we had a dry erase board in our kitchen, and we just made a very simple debt payoff thermometer where we put I think it was about $32,000, and we broke it up, to like into $8,000 quarters, and then down into like 1,000 pieces and $1,000 pieces in there. And so we said, okay, once we've paid off 8,000, we're going to go get Indian food at our favorite restaurant. Once we pay off 16,000. And so we were sending my income there, and then we were finding extra income. And this was long enough ago that we were still getting statements in the mail. And on the day that we knew the statement would come, like we'd both race home because we wanted to be the one to fill in the thermometer, because it got to be fun.
Right.
As I suggested, it got to be like, oh yay, we can color in another block on the thermometer. There's another
Yes.
$1,000 gone.
Yes.
And so something that's a long slog. I mean, debt payoff is not a great
Right.
day at the beach.
Right.
We found a way to make it fun, and then because we have this spirit of competition, we were like seeing who could be the one to get home first to color it in in the debt thermometer. We'd see who could find a little extra to send in addition to what we were already sending.
Yeah.
And so we got that competition going, we got the fun going, and then that made this long process that could have taken a really long time and been boring and just awful.
Right.
And we got it done in about 15 months, and we had a good time with it.
Yeah. I've done things where when I needed to be focused, this was about 5 years ago, really needed to be focused on my budgeting and my spending, more so my spending.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I looked at it every day. For every day, I would look at it and make sure I look at every transaction and understand where I'm spending. I'd put in an envelope, $5.
Mm-hmm.
And I would put the date that I did it today, $5, $5. And at the end of the month, I'd have that's only $150, but it was so gratifying to where then I continued it for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing you know, don't make me do math, but the next thing you know, at the end of the year, I did something with the $1,000 or $1,500 that it was. So you're right. It takes the stress out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so to your point, you were talking about how when you are stressed about things and you're all in your head about it, you can't just work. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can't work through things. So your objective too is to get rid of the stress. So then you could be more creative. You could be more, playful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can enjoy it more, right?
Yes. Well, and it's kind of like how it can be really easy to give a friend advice about a situation. You can see like, oh yeah, if you did this and then this, I think that would make things a lot easier for you. But it can be so hard to be in the same situation and take your own advice.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, and it's because you feel the anxiety and the stress of your own situation, whereas, what you're feeling for, a friend is empathy and wanting to help. So one of the things about making things more playful and gamifying is that it allows you to have a little distance between the situation and how you feel about it.
Right.
And with that distance, you get a little bit more clarity on options. And this happens to all of us. I mean, we all have situations where we're so close to it, we just can't see the solution.
Right. And we're just swirling and just causing more and more anxiety and stress for ourselves.
Yes. And we can also not even realize we're in the midst of that. We think we're thinking rationally. We think that we're doing everything right. And it'll take a third party or, like something, even if I've had situations where like, if I'm stressing about something and I go watch a movie and I am with someone else, I am someone else for 2.5 hours and come back, I can think about it better.
Right. It's true.
And so just recognizing when you're too close to something and how, that spirit of play, or even thinking about, one of the things I like to do is, especially when you're really stressed, how would you tell this story 10 years from now once it's funny? And think about it that way. That can also help you get that distance, and help you find the humor in it, because in most things there's some humor in it.
Yeah.
And finding that humor and being able to laugh at yourself, laugh at the situation. And that's not to say I don't take financial stress and serious financial situations seriously.
Right.
But in the same way that, when you're dealing with a health scare or, you've lost a parent or anything like that, there will be moments where you're telling kind of dark jokes. And because that makes it a lot easier for you to handle what comes next.
Right.
And so recognizing that money is like that as well. If necessary, it can be like telling funny jokes at a funeral, because that helps break the tension and helps everyone get together.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that I think a lot of us forget about when it comes to money, because money is a taboo subject in our culture and we just don't talk about it. So we don't have a chance to tell those dark jokes or make that funny story about money that helps you get a little bit more clarity.
Do you also, because I love your playful side, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, from a logical perspective, do you ever look at your client and, pretty much, because this is what I have to do to myself. I have to, so in your case, remind them you've been through shit before and you've gotten through it and you've, spent hours, days, months, years, totally stressed out and anxious about something, but you've gotten to the other side. And therefore consider that, because any moment of time you're expending in stress and anxiety is just losing that time. Like, so I love the playful side, but call your clients out to kind of remember that as well.
Absolutely. Several of my clients have been in situations where, they're getting out of a difficult marriage. They're dealing with job loss or something like that. And, just in the establishing call where they tell me where they are right now, I'll say, look at how far you've come. You're a badass. I mean, you have done X, Y, and Z. You've left an abusive marriage. You have, gotten custody of your kids. You have done the really hard stuff. What we're doing now is going to be a lot easier. Yeah. And it feels hard because for whatever reason, you've got a limiting belief about money, but recognize what a badass you are and start from there.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I wish I have had you in my corner for the last 30 years, because, I was in college and I got audited by the IRS because I was making too much money as a student.
Oh my goodness.
And then, I lost $150,000 in a business that I was only with for 6 months. And then, yes, I can laugh about it now, to your point, but at the same time, I look at it and I say, I've gotten through that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can get through other things. So now a little bit serious though. So a lot of people are in their head and they're scared to death about what's going on in the world, and this looming, we have inflation, but this looming possible recession that could be upon us again. And as opposed to, I don't think you want them starting to grab at everything that they've got. What would you say to them? And you wrote in your book about planning for an inflation, planning for bad times. Well, those are my words, not yours. So what do you say about that? What does that mean? And what does that look like for someone?
So recession is one of those things that it's this, boogeyman that we like. It's the economic boogeyman. And then you've got economists who, you get two economists, three opinions. And so they say like we're headed for an inflation, and like headed for a recession because of inflation, because of gas prices, housing prices, grocery prices. It's very clear. And then you have another person saying like nobody knows, who can tell? And so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So the truth is, no one has a crystal ball. So there's no way of knowing for sure. But there are patterns, and sorry, that's my cat's tail. You just saw through this.
You do not need to apologize. Love it. Love it. Love it.
So there are patterns that people, that economists notice. And the thing is, the economy does go through cycles where it expands and contracts, and we are overdue for it to contract some. So with that said, what that means is, if you know that that's coming, and what I think is we need to be planning for it always, right. Even when things are going gangbuster, plan for what will I do if the economy contracts. And so some of those things are all the things we talk about, I call them the greatest hits of financial writers. It's, that old favorite, make sure you have an emergency fund of at least 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses.
Right.
So, and then there's other stuff like know what your minimum budget is just to keep the lights on, what's it going to cost for mortgage, utilities, groceries, childcare, and then what can you cut out if you need to.
Right.
And then being cognizant about how you spend your money is really, really helpful. If you're someone who's never paid attention to how you spend your money, I think like what you suggested, just checking your transactions on a weekly or twice weekly basis can be great, because all that does is it gives you information. But that information will be in your head the next time you're like, oh, you know what? I'll just run to, Starbucks and get a couple coffees. I want to buy one for my friend too, and blah, 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 right. blah. And if you think, you know what? I spent $50 at Starbucks last week. Maybe I'll just call my friend and say hi.
It's so true. You shock yourself when you start looking at stuff. Yeah.
And so having that information, and a lot of people are afraid to have that information. I had a friend who once told me, like, I don't go to the doctor because I only get bad news. I was like, you only get bad news because you don't go to the doctor.
It's so true.
So people are like, I feel like, checking my transactions is always awful. And it's like, well, you feel that way because you only check it when there's an emergency.
Right.
When something bad has happened, and so
right.
you got to check it and work it out. So just having that information can give you an opportunity to make changes to how you spend money, and that can also help you kind of take a look at, like, what were you spending on groceries before? What are you spending now? You're buying generally the same things. And you're realizing, wow, ground beef is really expensive. Okay, maybe we'll be doing a little more chicken, or maybe we're just going to try more vegetarian options.
Right.
So having that information empowers you to make the best choices for your finances, no matter what is happening in the economy.
And I would say, do your clients also experience not only empowerment, but control? And control can keep you sane.
Yeah.
Control can keep you off the edge of like desperation. I've been there. I mean, you and I could probably have a whole series of a podcast. You just talking to me about my money stuff over the last 40 years, because I've had them. But to everything that you're saying, I also can laugh about it now because I've been through it, and there are solutions to those situations. But I just wish I'd met you many years ago. So you and Joe, and Joe Saul-Sehy?
Sehy.
Okay, so Sehy, I'm sorry.
Sehy.
So co-author of your Stacked, your super serious guide to modern money management. Well, you guys are very open and upfront, which I love, about your mistakes. Share. You must share. You must help us realize that we're not alone. What were your mistakes, and why did you decide to share them?
So I'll start with the second question first. We wanted to share our mistakes because we didn't want people to feel like we were, these gurus up on the mountain that you come for the enlightenment. We are just as human as everyone else, and we make just as many mistakes as everyone else in finance, even for like a lifelong money nerd like myself. I have made my share of financial mistakes. And what's funny is Joe's financial mistakes that he talks about are a little more typical financial mistakes. Mine, I think, is more permanent. That is because I have a very ill-advised tattoo.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was 22 or 23, I was dating this complete jabroni who was not worthy of me. We broke up, and I shed a few tears over this jabroni. And then 2 weeks later, my grandmother died.
Ooh.
And my grandmother and I were very close. I just thought the world of her. She was amazing. And I was so mad at myself for having shed those tears over Mr. Jabroni face. So I was like, you know what? I need to remind myself to save my tears for things that matter. So I went.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So I decided that I needed to get a teardrop tattoo on my back right shoulder, and I needed it right then. And so I was in my early 20s. It was $150. I went in without having thought about it for more than, I don't know, 20 minutes. It took less than 10 after leaving the tattoo parlor. Well, for one thing, that the $150 came from my grocery budget, so I was going to be like peanut butter and ramen the rest of the month.
Yes.
And for another, I was like, I just put permanent body modification.
No judgment here. I don't have any, but no judgment.
And then it gets worse. Several months later, I learned that among certain gangs, a teardrop tattoo represents every person the inked individual has killed. So my tattoo seems to say that I offed my own grandma.
Mercy. So the moral of that story is do your research on tattoos before you get one. If you're going to, make sure you do some research.
So financially, the mistake was relatively big, but because as I said, I've always been a money nerd. I knew where the money was coming from. I was able to make that work.
Right.
But I made a permanent decision because there's a couple of reasons why that decision was there. One was I felt like I needed to honor my grandmother in a way. And I was very much raised with the idea that a way to honor someone is to kind of give something up, to make a sacrifice for that person. And so the idea of spending $150 to like show the whole world how much I loved my grandmother,
right.
And having to subsist on ramen and peanut butter for a month was going to be a way of showing my grandmother how much I cared. The thing is, my grandmother would have been horrified.
I was going to say, your grandmother probably would have been like, what are you doing? Yes.
Absolutely horrified.
Yes.
And so that was one of those like pivotal moments for me, recognizing how irrational my own brain could be in convincing me to do things that were not in my best interest.
Right.
And it helped
when you're
me
in a vulnerable state, when you're in a vulnerable emotional state.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's when you often will see people make the strangest or least thought out decisions about their money is when they are vulnerable.
Right.
So the other time when I have spent money in ways where I'm like, what was I thinking? Was right after I had a baby. Because in those moments, I'm just like, I need to make sure this child is protected from everything.
So what'd you buy?
I spent way too much on car seats. My husband is an automotive engineer, and he was just like, look, I understand crash tests and all of that. I understand this. I was like, I don't trust you.
Yeah. We need a seat with 5 seatbelts attached to it. That's hysterical. Well, I think anyone listening or watching can, is sitting there like I am, like, nodding their head going, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. Yeah, absolutely. So that's awesome. Now, what would you tell someone who right now is listening? They saw that, they saw the subject of bringing fun to finance because they're just totally stressed out. And what would you share with them as far as even one thing they could do or take away from this conversation and from all of your expertise?
So something that I think is really helpful is figuring out your why, your North Star, like what is most important to you. Mm-hmm. Because once you know what's most important, then it's a lot easier to get rid of the things that are less important. So, and that's, for instance, with the car seat thing, that I thought I was doing that. I was like, what's most important is the child's safety. But so it can, there are ways where that can be difficult. But when it comes to financial decisions, a lot of times we make financial decisions because they're convenient, or because we've always done them, or because of tradition, or because our parents are guilting us, or whatever it is. And so if we come at it from like, okay, what's most important to me is that I get to spend quality time with my kids. What's most important to me is that I get to spend time doing my writing or my quilting or whatever is my artwork. What's most important to me is being able to rescue animals. Once you've got that moment, that why of what is behind the decisions you make, then you can start thinking through any financial decision with, does this serve my why? So if you most want to be able to foster rescue animals, and you've got a financial decision like, okay, you're thinking about buying a new car. Well, does this serve your ability to foster rescue animals? Maybe it does. Maybe you need a larger car to be able to transport them. Maybe it doesn't, because the car payment is going to cut into the budget that you have for dealing with animals. And so you can actually kind of just start comparing things, and it gives you a sense of clarity rather than just following along in a decision without giving it the full thought that is going to be helpful to you.
And intention.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have to, excuse me, I have to ask you a question because it came up for me a couple of times based on what you were just saying. So someone establishes the why, and yet they still can't kind of push through and overcome, because this was me for a long time, maybe they felt shame if they made it appear as if they wanted abundance and they wanted prosperity and they wanted to get out of their money situation, or they wanted to make a lot of money, or and so they're just dealing with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. You mentioned the word guilt. what can they do? Because having the why is one thing, but then what can they do, or what do you help people do to then push through that kind of, that's deeper than, some of the other things that we've talked about. How do you help in that situation?
So shame is so corrosive, and it can be so difficult to root out. I mean, it's so deeply embedded. And so I'll tell you my tattoo story. I felt ashamed for a long time, and being able to laugh about it was helpful. So and that's something that I one of the reasons why I suggest thinking about how will you tell the story in 10 years when it's funny, is because you can help think of yourself on the other side of the shame.
Yeah.
That's one aspect of it. The other is kind of stepping outside of yourself, whether that's imagining you're talking to your best friend, who is telling you the same story is what you're telling. What would you say to your best friend? And, you would not say like, oh, you're terrible, shame on you to your best friend. You would be like, oh my goodness, you're human. These things happen. And so that's something that is really helpful. And actually, the psychologists have found that if you talk to yourself in the third person, instead of saying, oh, I'm such an idiot, you say to yourself, or I would say to myself, Emily, you're human. That gives you that kind of distance to kind of let shame have space away from you rather than eating you up.
Oh, I love that.
And then the third thing I love to recommend to people is imagine you woke up with amnesia. Just imagine you just woke up and this is your circumstance. What would you do?
Well, you didn't have all that baggage.
And then you
have all that memory and that belief system.
Yeah.
I like that.
And that, so like that third person talking, and then that imagining like, well, let's just say I just woke up to this, I've never been here before. I don't know anything about this. I don't know the background. Right. What would I do? That can create this amazing clarity, because like, well, this is what I want to do. And well, okay, well, then do it. There's no rules. I mean, there's some rules. Don't rob a bank, but
right. That's awesome. I love that. I love that because again, I'm visual, and I like to role play. That's going to come across really bad to some people, and I mean it too. No. But I love that because I can immediately put myself into that going, okay, just forget about everything in the past. And I love that. Love that. Well, this has been absolutely awesome. Time flies when you're having fun. Fun with finance. When you're having fun with finance with Emily Guy Birken. So everybody, especially those of you listening, because we've been putting up the links if you're on our Shitting the Bitch YouTube channel. EmilyGuyBirken.com is where you want to go to learn all about Emily. You can also pick up her book there and or Amazon called Stacked, Your Super Serious Guide to Modern Money Management. And then be sure to follow her on Twitter. She's got to be a blast on Twitter at Emily Guy Birken. Emily, thank you so much. This has been fabulous.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a wonderful time.
Yeah, and you've helped me reconcile some things from a
fun
perspective. Having fun. Yes. Thank you for the reminders. It's tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. And for everybody else, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Shitting the Bitch Radio and TV. Be sure to download us on any one of your podcast streaming services or go to our Shitting the Bitch YouTube channel. Leave comments, ratings, subscriptions, follow us, and let us know what topics and guests you want to hear about. So please join us next Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for another episode of Shitting the Bitch. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for taking part in Shitting the Bitch Radio and TV with Bernadette Bose. We would love to know what your biggest takeaway was. Go to Shitting the Bitch on Facebook or YouTube and leave a comment. You can also subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and YouTube so you don't miss a single episode of the show. And with your input, we can help other powerhouse women just like you find the show and decide if it's right for them. Learn more about Bernadette at balloffirecoaching.com. See you next week.